Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to our latest study, everyone. Today, we're exploring one of the most profound and, honestly, one of the most difficult universal human experiences. We're talking about the season of waiting. Let's face it, we are basically hardwired to hate waiting, right? We hate waiting in grocery store lines, we hate waiting for test results, and we really hate that feeling of waiting for our real lives to finally begin. But when you look throughout history, literature, and theology, the time between a promise being made and a promise being fulfilled, it's an absolute crucible. Specifically, we're going to focus on the betrothal period. It's this intense time of separation that tests our character, refines our purpose, and ultimately reveals who we really are at our core. So in this study, we're comparing two drastically different brides from two completely different sources. We're going to analyze the deeply haunting literary figure of Miss Havisham from Charles Dickens' classic Great Expectations, and we'll set her right alongside the majestic biblical concept of the Bride of Christ. As we'll see, the way we wait literally determines the reality of our future. So we've got to start by asking ourselves a fundamental question. What separates a tragic bride from a triumphant one? Just immerse yourself in the sensory details of this contrast for a second. On one side, imagine a dark, decaying manor house. The air is heavy, it's stale, it's suffocating. Dust is dancing in these tiny slivers of light that barely pierce the gloom. There's this faint, sickly sweet smell of rotten food and just a crushing sense of death and stagnation. Okay, take a breath. Now, on the other side, picture a state of radiant, luminous anticipation. We're talking brilliant whites and golds, the crisp, energetic air of a royal morning. There's purposeful preparation, joyful noise, and a heart beating so eagerly for a guaranteed, promised future. Both of these brides are in a period of waiting. Both are separated from their bridegrooms, but their responses? They couldn't possibly be more different. One lets the wait absolutely destroy her, while the other uses it to prepare for absolute glory.
Section 1. Havisham, a rotten vow.
Let's jump straight into the pages of Charles Dickens to really understand our first profile. Miss Havisham is, well, she's the ultimate shadow of a bride. She was once an incredibly wealthy heiress. She had the world at her fingertips, a great match in society. She fell passionately, blindly in love. The day was arranged, the extravagant dresses were bought, guests invited, but the bridegroom never showed. She got a letter of absolute betrayal from her fiancé right when she was actively dressing for her marriage, at exactly 20 minutes to 9 in the morning. To truly grasp the psychological horror of this, listen to what she tells the young boy, Pip, years later. "I know nothing of days of the week, nothing of weeks of the year." Man, think about how devastating that is. A normal person grieves, and eventually lets time heal the wound. But Miss Havisham? She literally stopped all the clocks in her massive estate at exactly 8:40. She completely divorced herself from the progression of time, because time means moving forward, and moving forward means healing. She made a conscious, terrifying choice that she would absolutely refuse to heal. Now, what's really interesting here is how her internal bitterness violently manifests in physical decay all around her. The clocks are permanently frozen at 8:40. She still wears her original wedding dress every single day, but over the decades, that bright white silk has yellowed, faded, and withered, kind of like she herself has withered to mere skin and bone. It looks less like a gown and way more like a burial shroud. Then there's the great opulent bride cake, just left sitting on the banquet table to become a literal heap of decay. She tells Pip that mice have gnawed at it for years, but that sharper teeth than mice have gnawed at her own soul. She boarded up the windows, completely blocked the sun out of her home. But honestly, the darkest, most tragic element of her decay is what she did to another human being. She adopted a beautiful young girl named Estella, not to love her, not to give her a good life. No, she meticulously developed her into a weapon. She raised Estella to wreak revenge on all men, actively teaching a child to be cold, proud, and to break hearts without mercy. She took her waiting period and weaponized it to inflict her pain on others. Time stopped. Darkness embraced. That right there is the tragic essence of Miss Havisham. It's actually a fascinating insight that Dickens is believed to have based her on a real woman who was jilted on her wedding day and lived the rest of her life in complete seclusion. But what Dickens highlights so brilliantly is that Miss Havisham didn't just passively get stuck. No, she aggressively and exhaustingly chose to stagnate. I mean, it takes an immense amount of effort to keep the sun out of a house for decades. She cultivated her bitterness like a twisted garden. When Pip confronts her later in life, he tells her that keeping part of Estella's right nature away from her was worse than bemoaning the past for 100 years. Havisham let the past consume her entirely. She chose the claustrophobic darkness of a dead house over the beautiful, healing sunlight of the living world. Section 2. Christ's radiant, expectant bride. So, let's transition from the dusty, suffocating decay of Miss Havisham to a completely opposite vision. Replace that image with brilliant whites, golds, and absolute radiance. We are now looking at the biblical concept of the bride of Christ. According to the scriptures, the bride of Christ is the church, made up of everyone who has trusted in Jesus Christ and received eternal life. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at ancient Jewish wedding customs. Back in biblical times, a marriage began with a strict betrothal period. The bride and groom would sign a covenant. They were legally considered husband and wife, but then they were separated. The groom would leave, go back to his father's house, and literally build an addition onto the house, a bridal chamber. The bride had no idea what day or hour he'd finish in return for her. Right now, the bride of Christ is in this exact betrothal period, separated from her bridegroom. But unlike Havisham's suffocating weight, this separation is definitely not meant for idle sadness or stagnation. It is a highly dedicated time meant for active, diligent preparation. So how exactly does this bride actively wait? Well, first off, her primary responsibility during the betrothal is fierce loyalty and faithfulness to a groom she can't currently see. Second, instead of sitting around in a yellowing, decaying dress, she is actively preparing brilliant white garments of holiness and righteousness for her arrival in the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. And there's this fascinating prophetic typology here, foreshadowed by the story of Ruth, the Gentile bride. Ruth was a Moabite, right? A stranger, a foreigner, entirely outside the covenant. Yet she famously declared to her mother-in-law Naomi, "Your people will be my people, and your God my God." She faithfully gave herself to the Jewish people and was eventually redeemed by Boaz, who serves as a brilliant historical picture of Christ. It's incredibly profound that the Book of Ruth is read in synagogues all across the world every single year at the time of the Feast of Weeks, also known as Pentecost. This feast is a harvest festival celebrating the giving of the law, but it's intricately tied to the prophetic timeline of the Gentile bride being grafted in. Her act of preparation is woven deeply into history itself. This dynamic readiness perfectly aligns with the instruction given directly to the bride in Luke chapter 12. It says, "Let your loins be girded about, and your lights burning, and ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord when he will return from the wedding." Let's unpack that metaphor a bit. Having your loins girded meant pulling up those long flowing robes they wore back then and tucking them into your belt so you could run, work, or fight without tripping over yourself. It's a posture of athletic, vigilant readiness. And keeping your lights burning references the parable of the virgins, keeping fresh oil in your lamps, refusing to let your spiritual life burn out in the dark. There is absolutely no sleeping here. There's no stopping the clocks. The bride is dynamically engaged, her spiritual muscles are flexed, and she is fully prepared to throw open that door the absolute second the bridegroom knocks.
Section 3. A Tale of Two Brides.
Let's bring these two distinct narratives together now and really contrast their timelines. On one hand, you have the profound claustrophobia of Miss Havisham. Her timeline abruptly hits a brick wall at exactly 8:40. From that singular minute on, there is zero progression, no character development, no hope, just an eternity of self-inflicted decay. Time literally dies inside her house. But directly opposed to that, the bride of Christ moves purposefully through the grand sweeping arc of prophetic time. Her betrothal has this incredible forward momentum. We see this preparation mapped out through historical events like the Feast of Weeks and the first fruits of the harvest. Her timeline isn't moving toward dust and cobwebs, it's hurtling forward toward a breathtaking, glorious future. We're talking the rapture, the ultimate wedding ceremony, and an eternal, joyful union in the holy city of the New Jerusalem. Prophetic time always has motion. The direct thematic collision of our study really comes to life when you look at these two side by side. On side A, we see a woman sitting in literal and spiritual darkness, harboring deep vengeance in her heart. She's entirely looking backward, wholly consumed by the past and the devastating betrayal she suffered. But then look at side B. Directly opposed to Havisham, we see a bride characterized by brilliant radiance and unwavering faithfulness. She's constantly looking forward. She absolutely refuses to be dragged down by the darkness or the disappointments of the current world. She's actively preparing for a holy future. One waits in rotting, bitter isolation, dragging down anyone who gets near her. The other waits in expectant, radiant preparation, operating as a beacon of light, shining brightly in a totally dark world. You know, the biblical and prophetic sources we're studying also heavily emphasize specific durations of waiting. Take the famous prophecy in Jeremiah of 70 years of exile in Babylon. The Israelites had to wait in a foreign land. But here's why that number 70 is so vital to understand. It proved that the waiting had a divine expiration date. The biblical timeline always has a purpose and a guaranteed conclusion. We don't have to get bogged down in date setting to understand the core principle here. Unlike Miss Havisham, who just bemoaned her past through 100 years of endless, dusty stagnation, the bride's timeline is continually moving toward a specific, triumphant culmination. The betrothal period will absolutely end, the groom will return, and therefore every single agonizing moment of the wait is meant to be utilized for readiness. Section 4. Avoiding the Havisham Trap. This brings us to the ultimate climax of this study, where we connect these ancient texts and literary warnings directly to your own life. The core warning is simple but so crucial. The bride of Christ must avoid the Havisham trap. This period of waiting for the bridegroom must never, ever become a time of spiritual stagnation, isolation, or bitterness. And let's be real for a second, it is incredibly easy to fall into this trap today. When we look around at societal decay, when we face modern cynicism, or when we endure years of delayed answers to our deepest prayers, the temptation is strong. We just want to board up our windows, stop the clocks, shut out the sun, and let the mice gnaw at our bitter hearts. But giving into that disappointment, that is spiritual death. The bride of Christ must consciously, actively, fight against becoming Miss Havisham. So how do we do it? How do we ensure we maintain our light and our readiness in a dark world? Well, here are the clear, actionable steps derived from our sources today. Step 1. Keep moving forward in spiritual time. Do not build a monument to your pain. When disappointment hits, you've got to continue to diligently seek, search, and grow. Step 2. Reject the darkness of past betrayals. Miss Havisham let a betrayal turn her into a monster who actively broke other people's hearts. The bride of Christ has to practice the active and, yes, sometimes exhausting effort of forgiveness and maintain a heart of mercy. Step 3. Prepare radiant garments of holiness. Instead of wearing a yellow, decaying dress of the past, clothe yourself in righteousness through daily acts of charity, grace, and spiritual discipline, keeping your spiritual garments clean for the New Jerusalem. And finally, step 4, watch eagerly for the bridegroom. Keep your loins girded and your lights burning with fresh oil. Do not gather dust in the dark. Be like the faithful, athletic servants who are actively awake and waiting when the master finally returns. I want to wrap up our study today by just slowing down for a second and leaving you with this final, incredibly provocative thought. Really let the gravity of this question sink in. In the waiting period of your own life, are you gathering dust or are you preparing your garments? When the delays come, are you letting bitterness stop your clocks and board up your windows, or are you actively, expectantly moving forward in faith toward the light? The stakes literally couldn't be higher, and the choice is entirely yours. Keep your lights burning, stay vigilant, and whatever you do, don't fall into the Havisham trap. Thanks so much for joining me for this study, and keep watching.